I don't know whether he told you, but in the recording process, we ended up becoming each other. It was pretty funny because he'd go, "What do you think?" And I go, well, if I was you, this is what I'd think. Anyway, and hence that's the title of the EP, is Who Was Who, you know. Venus and Mars erased. Wow, it's a bit of a long story. Back in the past 70s, 80s, I'm talking about the 1980s, I met Jim Kelly and a guy called Michael Kenny, who were the main guys in a band called Crossfire. After a while, I think they wanted to see whether they needed have a vocal, because they were instrumental, sort of fusion jazz, and I think they wanted to move into some other areas with vocals. And they asked me would I like to come and sing with them by leaving a little message under the door, which I never found. So it didn't actually happen. But what happened was Jim ended up putting together a band called Connection, and we worked in a place called the All Nations Club every Sunday. And that's when Jim and I started working together. And out of that, with Michael Kenny in the band as well, it went on to become Supermarket, which did, I guess we're talking 83 through to about 85, regularly at the Basement in Sydney. And it was a fabulous band, 14 pieces, and we were told it'll never work economically, but it did. It was amazing, and we ended up flying around the country doing lots of corporate gigs and all that stuff. So that's sort of basically the early days of Jim and I getting together. But then once that finished, everything sort of quietened down in Sydney in terms of venues and stuff like that. So Jim ended up heading up to Lismore and becoming the head of the music department in the uni up there. So we sort of lost contact for quite a long time. And it wasn't until last year that I got a call from Jim saying he was working with an artist who was doing an album, and they were looking for someone to do a duet or a duo with the person doing the album. And he said, would you like to hear it, and would you like to be involved? And I heard it and I went, yeah. I said, I'd love to do it. So that's how it sort of connected. Jim did some amazing work on this album, and then I managed to get a vocal on it. And while we were doing it, Jim said, man, we haven't worked together for so long. Isn't it about time we, did something together? And, Jim's sort of like he's become a real guru in recording, and, he's a real mad person out there looking for new sounds and trying to perfect as much as he can. I was stuck in the 70s bubble interpreting great songs from the 70s, which I love, So this was all a whole new thing. And so the idea was that if I was going to write anything, and I had some things that I'd written, but I wasn't that crazy about, but he said, just send them to me. So I would send a basic track with acoustic guitar and a vocal, and I'd say, look, I don't know whether you like this or whether you do. And eventually we ended up with quite a few songs that he really did like, to my amazement. But the thing was, he kept my vocal, which was the melody in some ways, and then he just weaved his genius around it. And that's how it sort of came about. And he was asking me all the time on the phone, do you like it? What do you think? Because this is different. I know this is not your normal sort of thing. And I said, man, I don't know, to be honest, but I just want to go with you on this because this is new for me, And I'm so glad I did, because it just came out so wonderful and so different to what I'm used to. And I needed to do that, and it was original, which I hadn't really got involved in. So that's how it all sort of came about, and that's why we ended up with a product, an EP called Who Was Who. Well, not being a proficient songwriter, this was all a new thing for me. So what I started to do was think of titles. Think of a title for a song and just let it sit around for a while and think about it, rather than sort of laboriously sitting over a desk and trying to write a lyric, from nowhere. So I thought, well, if I just describe a title and think about it for a few days, I might come up with sort of an idea, for the lyric. And that's sort of how it worked. I remember writing down one day, I'm still here, you're still there. Now that couldn't mean anything, but it sort of came to me in the end that it was, about, in a sort of a bluesy style, someone missing a loved one. I woke up one morning and thinking about it, I just started writing the lyric down. And it just came to me straight away, and I went, wow, that's really cool. And some of the stuff on the EP is true stories about a young guy wanting to meet up with a person and create a relationship that was quite a funny story within our family. And I took that on as a bit of a joke, and ended up writing a song called Fooling with the Barge. And that's how that came about, just thinking about it, and we were having a lot of fun with the lyrics, trying to work out how this could be a bit amusing. So that was one of the tracks. Then there was an old track that I did, that I revamped, and it was really weird. It was sort of like, I said to Jim, look, I'm not sure about this song. It's called It's a Game. And I wasn't sure about it. There's a lot of lyrics in it. There's a lot of, it was, I was trying to sort of work out how to sort of make it a little bit easier to follow lyrically. And all I did was chop out every second line. And it all started to make sense. I went, far out, this is going to work, I think. And Jim loved it, so we ended up with that track. And then there was a couple of others that I worked with Janice Slater, who's a lyric writer, wonderful talent, an amazing singer. And we wrote a couple of tunes, one called Same Moon. I just wrote the melody and worked out the vocal melody. She wrote the lyric. And the second one was Is This the Last Goodbye, that she wrote the lyric for. I ended up with writing and working with two fabulous people, Jim Kelly and Janice Slater, and we ended up with 6 tunes. Originals. Wow, originals. So that was cool. There's a great tune on that I haven't mentioned, written by Bill Risby and Natalie Morrison. All Is New Again. It's a really cool track, and it was sort of a standout that I'd been lucky enough to sing on a demo, and my wife and I, Susie, loved it so much that I thought I'd ring Bill and said, Bill, look, I'm working on some songs with Jim Kelly. Do you mind if we do a version of one of your songs? And he said, no, go ahead, great. So that was cool. So I sent it to Jim, and Jim fell in love with it. So we decided we'd have to do it. So I just basically gave him what I'd done on the demo, and then he arranged everything around it, and we got Bill to come in, Bill Risby, who is a fabulous piano player, played keyboard on it. So it was all a joint effort. So I think that's the one for me, and it's probably because I admire their work that they put into that song, and it gave me an opportunity to perform the vocal on it without worrying about whether it was up to standard or not, because that's me being pedantic about pretty well everything I do, and that gave me a bit of an opportunity to try and express the song without worrying about whether it was, good enough, I tried so hard to find a way through all my days. I think initially it was a bit sort of new, and it was a bit, wasn't sure. where it was all heading, because it was like being created from the ground up, really. I mean, the songs were sort of basically there, but it was a whole new attitude. So it was a little bit sort of wondering whether this is gonna work out, which most projects that you get involved in do, just at the start. But as we worked together, it just became such fun and so exciting, because every day there was something different. There was a different attitude. Like Jim would ring up and say, look, I think I've found something with this tune. I think I've found the theme. I think I've found something that's going to work. And then he'd ring back the next day and go, no, it didn't work. and then we'd talk about it, and then he'd go back. And then all of a sudden the next day he'd ring up and go, I got it. So, you know, it was all that sort of stuff. And just to follow on with that question, you know, we respect each other so much, you know, musically, because of our history. You know, we've known each other for so long. I respect his talent, his whole sort of attitude towards life and towards music. And so, you know, it's very easy to work with Jim Kelly. Gee, there were a lot of moments. Probably, apart from the telephone calls that we spoke together each day, the fun time, I guess, was when we got near the completion of the project. Susie and I drove up to Lismore because I wanted to be in his studio with Jim, rather than, we probably haven't explained that a lot of this was working with different people sending in tracks and Jim putting it all together like knitting. But this one was, the vocals were really important to me, and they were very important to Jim. So we decided we should be together doing it, rather than me sitting at home on my computer and recording the vocals. I needed to be with him. I just knew that we'd have to join together and work together on it. And as it turned out, it was a fantastic decision, because we did have a lot of fun, and we just did things we probably wouldn't have done if we weren't together, you know, just with different things and different ideas about how a melody should build, and are we building enough? Are we going in the right direction with its attitude? You know, all those sort of things. So that was real fun, just working with him doing that. I was getting excited. This could be for real. But soon I was nervous, feeling insecure. Then the sky. Look, I'd have to say that was Jim's baby. Man, he did so much homework, referencing other songs, just to get some ideas. We're big fans of Steely Dan, obviously, big fans of David Crosby, and Jim put me on to David Crosby. I wasn't really aware that Crosby had done a lot of albums way after Crosby, Stills and Nash. And there was an album called For Free, and there's some tracks on that I just absolutely adored. And so in some ways, we would look at maybe a couple of the tunes and we'd say, look, I think, you know, the drum track on such and such would really work on this new song we're doing. What do you think? And so there was a bit of that going on. That's how it all sort of, you know, then Jim would, when we agreed on it, Jim would just build it and just build it and build it. I'm just in awe of his energy and enthusiasm, the way he just worked so hard on those tracks. I'm so appreciative, you know. 'Cause I'm still here, and you're still there. Now I think after working with Jim on these projects, we're definitely going to do some more. We'll definitely do some more work. And for me, it's like continuing on with trying to work with original music, plus, which is a plus for me, because I work in my own show, which is like a yacht rock thing that I love because it's the music of the 70s and the 80s that I adore, and I'll always want to do that. But Jim's sort of brought this whole idea of originality into my thing, and I definitely want to do more work with him. I definitely want to probably write some more things with Janice. I really like the idea of the two separate identities. I like the idea of working with my fabulous musical mates, having fun, and I like the idea of being creative in an original way. To me, it sort of balances me out, and I sort of like that feeling. I am so grateful for the fact that through Jim and the players who respect Jim so much and wanted to become part of this project, I should say I'm really appreciative of their contribution, and they did some fantastic work. So I would mention, first of all, Jim's work, which was magnificent and amazing, and then all the wonderful players that have worked on the album with Jim. You know, there was Brendan St Ledger played keyboards, Clayton Doley played Hammond organ on one of the tracks, Victor Rounds on bass, Joe Elms did some vocals, VVs. An amazing job on our blues track sung by the amazing Jade MacRae, who is touring around the world at the moment with Joe Bonanassa. An amazing drummer called Scotty Hills, who not only did he contribute his fantastic talent, but also was so involved in the end result. And he works very closely with Jim, so that was a magic, because drums to me are like really important when it comes down to being in the pocket and just working well. So I'm so appreciative of those people that have put in so much work, and they just did it because they wanted to play some music, you know. It was great.
Well, it's a shame.